In about mid-January in 2018, I was preparing a strategy document for a client who wanted to look at new ways of raising money through Facebook. And it was a hospital client. They did a lot of community fundraising, a lot of events. I was a little worried my regular giving, kind of petition-led stuff wouldn't work for them. And I had this notion, based on stuff I'd seen in the UK, of that mass participation events could work for smaller charities, using Facebook lead ads to sign people up. And I was debating putting it in. It was kind of just on my mind. The document was open. I was sticking in the key activities we're going to do throughout the year. And I just decided to stick it in. I hadn't figured out anything about Facebook challenges. I wasn't really thinking too much about what it would be or how we would do it. I just kind of said, I'll stick in mass participation events and we'll figure it out later. This led to a €100 test in May of 2018 on 10,000 steps a day in May. This is the first Facebook challenge we did. We ended up spending $2,500 on media. It did really well at the first go when we hadn't really got a clue what we were doing. The guys internally had brilliant ideas for running challenges, which absolutely flew. And essentially, this one test led to everything I've been doing for the last 4 years. Most people in this room have been influenced by this in some way. We've raised €54 million for our clients. Give Panel had about 100 and at least 100 last year. And I've spoken to charities in the US who have raised more than 30 or 40 million themselves. So I'm saying this is a €1 billion thing. If you don't believe me, come back to me in 2 years and you'll see that it is. But that initial test could so easily not have been done, could so easily not have been included. And had I not included that at that time with this organisation, with the head of fundraising they have, who's experienced in events, and a community executive, David Burns, managing it, who had experience with Facebook groups from his student union days, I don't think this ever would have happened. So I go back to this one point. It's kind of, it blows my mind really that it was such a small thing, and it's basically taken over my whole working life, and been so significant for so many organizations that I care about their work. And since Facebook have now come along and added challenges into the platform, and this is definitely going to be a €1 billion thing. So despite the €1 billion, which is really positive, there is a need for an argument. So the argument starts with our own definition of fundraising. You know, this is the Social Fundraising Summit. We call it fundraising. And built into that, there's an immediacy and kind of an overwhelming focus on raising money. It's literally the name of the thing that we do, of this little subsection of marketing that we've kind of siphoned off and called marketing for the charity sector. And this leads to short-term thinking. It leads to an over-focus on ROI. And I think there's flaws, and for everything that's good about this, I think there's flaws in this. Add to that in the depths of every charity lies a director of finance or head of finance who, you know, has confidence in his own or her own knowledge, and has an influence on the organization which is probably too broad. And so I think that this is great, because I found this on The Guardian. This is a former head of finance for one of my clients who did this article with The Guardian. And I was going to say what's wrong with the head of finance type thinking. And I wonder if in this article he's actually said it. Sure enough, third paragraph, we have lots of supporters fundraising for us, and it is my responsibility to make sure the money is used in the most effective way. So my understanding of the director of finance role is they're generally in charge of money and the processes and moving around of money. I find that in nearly every organization there's a director of finance, or there's a CEO, maybe even a head of fundraising, who overestimates their own knowledge of the world, who kind of oversimplifies how the world actually works, and has a huge impact on the activity that takes place in that organization without being qualified to really do it. Because if you take what this guy is saying literally, he has promoted himself to head of finance, innovation, acquisition, and fundraising strategy, all in one word, all by using the word effective. My responsibility to determine what's effective. And I'm going to argue against that. I'm going to argue that your director of finance is wrong, but so is, Dan Pallotta as kind of the anti-head of finance. On the other end of the spectrum, his argument being that you should be able to spend any amount of money as long as you're raising money. It's positive. And of course, that's too far to the extreme. You must be conscientious when you're spending the money that's been generated, from donors. And the people who work in the charity sector are, generally speaking, very conscientious of this. Probably too conscientious and too aware of where the income has come from. And that's my experience in the charity sector. And I'm always quick to tell my friends that. When you put these three things together, focus on fundraising, director of finance-esque influence, and conscientious people, what you get is a lack of innovation, a lack of new ideas, a lack of testing, all of which for me is summarized in one email I received from a woman last year who's in the UK, not a client, just someone who emailed me saying, "It's been so exciting to work on something so different. My 20 years in events fundraising, nothing has changed really. I've been doing the same events every year, London Marathon, bake sales, etc." So this professional person who's worked in numerous charities has done the same thing every year for 20 years. In a two-decade period where the world has been utterly transformed, her job was unaffected. I won't labour this point. I'm sure some of you know, a lot of you know what I'm speaking about. But I think that is shocking. I think it's a staggering state of events. The only way forward out of this is the testing. So, €500. Let's be specific here. Let's be tangible and practical. Let's not have a load of sort of highfalutin testing frameworks and theory. If you spend €500 on an idea and your ads are reasonably good, you will learn cost per fundraiser and average raised. That's the amount of money you need. If you're not confident about your ads or your creative, spend $1,000 and you'll get there. When I put this idea to the Matter Foundation, the second paragraph sitting just below this was, as there are limited resources available, this campaign can be run entirely on Facebook, avoiding expensive and unnecessary costs such as a microsite. This can be cheaply tested in summer 2018 to establish cost per fundraiser and the average gift. So my thinking, even back then, was the same. Was like, we'll just run a small test of this. You don't need to spend a lot of money to run a test online. You don't need to make a big song and dance about a campaign. You can test something quietly in the corner at a time when your team has some capacity. And that's exactly how you should test. That's exactly how you should try out new ideas. You shouldn't run tests like the ones we used to run in Concern Worldwide. Back in 2013, we used to run big banner ad campaigns for Concern. And the testing process we used was absolutely based on direct mail. It was based on cold direct mail. We would come up with a large media budget, one banner ad designed by an expensive creative agency. We'd check the ROI after 5 days. We wouldn't even give it a week. Kill the campaign if the ROI was less than 4-1 straight away. Don't iterate. Proclaim banner ads don't work for fundraising. Reallocate the budget. Feel good about that and move on. And this is exactly the wrong way to make progress. You don't need to go big. It doesn't need to be, go for the home run and gone. You can iterate and test and learn at small levels. Or don't do this type of testing online. This is a campaign for a client who'd done a really successful squats challenge. We went big on media budget, big on projections for a lunges challenge straight after. This is at the height of the pandemic when things were going brilliantly. And just the demand for lunges was nowhere near squats. So, we missed the target by 94%. And when you put big money up and you put big media budget up and you put big projections up there and you miss by this much, you lose the credibility and trust of senior people. And in that organization, we're still struggling and battling to regain the trust that was lost by this test. So the whole focus of testing is spend that €500, keep it small, and whatever you learn, whatever your failures are, you don't lose the trust of the senior people. You test something which might not work without losing the trust of senior people. That's the key. You have to test, be ballsy and be brave, and test things which could indeed fall flat on their face, without losing trust. We call these wildcards, and this actually came up as a direct result of that lunges campaign. We set out to test three wildcards side by side for a client, spend €500 on each one, and really build the real campaigns. These are not smoke tests. We build a group, we set up a teacher registration form, we have a small campaign running, and the idea is test three, brand new novel ideas which could fall flat on their face, spend €500 on each, and the best of the three of them, spend your remaining $3,500. You've got $5,000 media budget in total. Spend a decent bit of budget on the best of the three. And that then basically gives you 3 times as much learnings as you would with one campaign. You're much more likely to get it to break even when you have 3 crazy ideas instead of 1 crazy idea. Takes the pressure off. It allows you, when you are testing 3 ideas side by side, it allows you to be bolder. You might have one in there that looks sort of familiar and looks like it could work, and you might have 2 in there that are really out there. But it takes the pressure off, and it allows you to get those really valuable learnings that are brave. One hint I'd say back to that director of finance dynamic is that you don't have to account for staff time in annual report, which means you can get away with testing more things. Report for them. And I wanted to show you some of the wildcard results we've had in 2021 to give you a sense of what the €500 can tell you. First of all, we have a fancy dress 5K for Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital. This is one I was really confident about. I thought a fancy dress 5K was brilliant. We'd seen the demand for 5Ks, and I thought, yeah, people want to do running. This is fun. And people already do 5Ks in the park. So you have these crazy characters who are already into running, who want to do a 5K in fancy dress. No, didn't happen. Sign-ups were expensive. Conversion to fundraising wasn't great. Spent £500 on media. Spent a good bit of money on other stuff, and only raised £3,114. We tried different things with the audience targeting, and the demand just wasn't there. Click-through rates were really low. We tried a few different audiences and couldn't find a group of people who wanted to do this challenge. So it was a conclusive no. For Refuge, we did a climb 2 mountains challenge. So it was climb 2 mountains in one day, drive out of the city, get out somewhere, go on a big hike, have lunch, go on another big hike. People signed up for this one, so we had 492 sign-ups for £500, but the follow-through was terrible. So just really didn't happen. You've got like 5% of the sign-ups actually fundraising, average raise £100. So there were some people who did this. It wasn't didn't completely bomb. Some people went and did this, but just not enough. If you spent more money on that, the results would be horrible. And the final one of the 3 I wanted to show you was a FIFA tournament we did for the Matter Foundation in Ireland last year. They spent €500. Everyone talks about gaming, gets excited about gaming. We wanted to see could we, scale that instead of just kind of tagging or, piggybacking off influencers. We signed up 307 people, so there was definitely some demand there. Conversion rate was low to fundraising, and the amounts raised were very low. So basically, it didn't work. And the interesting one about this is there was a large group of gamers who came back later to do something further who'd seen the ad. But as regards throwing gamers and gaming people into a Facebook group, like making them the people who are going to host and lead a tournament, didn't work. When you take those 3 things together and all the other kind of one-day challenges we ran last year, we learned conclusively that one-day challenges have a lower ROI than one-month challenges. And the sky didn't fall. Our clients didn't get really annoyed with us when we did 10 plus one-day challenges that were underwhelming. They were generally, as you probably were just now, really interested in the results. And we learned, we went into the year thinking that one-day challenges were the future and that we could do these challenges which are easier to run, less hassle, we had some small, low-level data which suggested that the average raise was nearly as high and that it was a lot less work. But that turned out to be low-hanging fruit for one client, which didn't really scale, didn't really work elsewhere. And that learning brings me back to the point about effective or ineffective. So if this guy looks at that work we did last year, he'd say ineffective. But I look at it and I say effective because it's guided our whole strategy and all of our activity and all of our wildcards for this year. We've got some stuff that we did see working in one day, which we're going to doing more of this year. But mostly we've moved on to longer challenges. And actually, it's helped us understand what works well about the 1-1 challenges better. So we've been emboldened to try longer challenges, for example. So when you frame it like that, you start to wonder, is that effective or ineffective? I'm not so sure. And when you look back at some of the failed tests we did in 2016 and 2017, which also made their way into this initial document that I gave the Matter Foundation, below the inexpensive testing paragraph was a paragraph about 3 different aspects of a Facebook challenge. 1, using Facebook lead ads. 2, directing them quickly and in an automated journey to sign up for a Facebook fundraiser. And 3, getting them to join a Facebook group. Now, the interesting thing about these 3 points, which basically came together to make Facebook challenges, they all came from failed campaigns. So I'd been doing stuff with Facebook lead ads that wasn't working, and some stuff with petitions that was working. I'd learned about automated journeys, and that really the first hour is crucial. First 2 hours are crucial. You have to email people back straight away. You have to set up an automated email journey with Zapier or MailChimp or whatever. And then by inviting people into a Facebook group, they can connect with other people who are doing the event. Like, these were all, I had no acquisition success really up to this point. I had nothing to really show for all my work. If that guy looked at me, he would have said ineffective as an investment, the charity sector, in terms of the wages I'd been paid, the client's money I'd spent, I just about broken even, maybe under broken even. So ineffective. Yet when you put those 3 learnings together with the right client, the right moment in time, boom, €1 billion. So I guess looking at it from that point of view, it's kind of hard to know what's effective or ineffective. And it maybe makes you question whether we should look at everything through the narrow, unstrategic, limited lens of an Excel sheet. And maybe we should actually take the view of recording your learnings. So do your small scale testing. Test things that might not work. Put the effort into them. And instead of worrying about the income, instead of worrying about the ROI, worry about your learnings. Record in detail, in bullet points, things you've learned. We can get 1 in every 200 people to click on decent Facebook ads. That costs about €1. We can convert 10% of people on the website. You know, these are the types of small things you learn over time. Finding out the counterintuitive things and the things that make sense naturally. And when you put those together in bullet points, it simplifies it. You don't need articles, you don't need presentations, you need a list of bullet points. So record your learnings in simple, factual bullet points, look back over them, return to them, have a look through the points, and over time you start to build a picture of the world and how the world works. And you'll get better ideas from that list of bullet points than you will from anywhere in the world. Which leads us on to the most important part of our presentation, which is the weird. So I would try to define a weird idea as being something which is either brilliant or terrible. It could be brilliant and it could be terrible, and you have no way of knowing which one it is. So if you think an idea is brilliant and you're sure it's brilliant, it's probably not weird enough. There's probably been 100 other fundraising managers or executives who've thought it was a brilliant idea and have already tried it. It's the truly weird things that truly make you uncomfortable that have the highest potential. This original idea was weird. You know, even putting it in Facebook, first of all, like I remember having to look up birthday fundraisers on Facebook to see, could you do a fundraiser on Facebook that wasn't a birthday fundraiser? Because I'd never seen any. The 10,000 steps a day in May, like I only did suggested 10,000 steps because my mother-in-law is a nurse in a hospital, and the matter is a hospital, and they'd just done a 10,000 steps a day challenge and been obsessed with it in their hospital. So I thought some of the nurses might do it in the hospital. Like that's how basic the thinking was. And we only did May because it rhymed with day. And I thought rhyming was important, which later on we learned it was not. So there was no great insight here around the audience or the month-long effect. It was a fairly random occurrence that just flew. And it was even the client who helped me kind of direct me back towards more simple month-long challenges after that. It's funny then when you come in at the end of all that process to talk in a room like this, and the people who are running the session, write a little bio, which I didn't write, and at the end say how to test them and when weird just works. And the funny thing about that is I'm not saying weird just works. I'm saying most of the time weird doesn't work. But weird is worth testing because you learn so much from it. And at some point, when you have that breakthrough, it's worth it. This thinking is hugely influenced by this book called The Black Swan. I could talk about this for the whole thing. I'll do my best to summarize some of the key points from the book and how they've influenced me. And the idea of the Black Swan, I got this done to explain it. Black Swan events are things which have a low likelihood, low frequency. They don't happen often, but when they do happen, they have high impact, high severity. So the way he would put it is the world is far, far more unpredictable and complicated than we think, which is not a problem, except when most of us don't know it. These Black Swan events come along and change everything. This is a really good time to talk about this because we're living through one right now in the Ukraine, and COVID-19 was pretty much a Black Swan event. The fact that they happen every 100 years or so means it's not an out Black Swan, but it was low likelihood, low frequency. We'd never lived through it before, so it certainly felt like a Black Swan event. And I like to quote my brother on this, who on the 12th of March 2020 said, look, we'll work from home for 3 or 4 weeks, then everything will be back to normal. This is hilarious because he has been working from home for so long that he's actually had to change his LinkedIn picture because he's gotten older since he moved home 2 years ago. And the funny thing about the Black Swan events is we don't learn from them. We continue to kind of pretend we knew it was going to happen anyway. Yeah, pandemic was always going to happen in our lifetime, so what's the big deal? And we continue to predict and we continue to plan as if the world is predictable. And we continue to be surprised when these events come along. But then we just muddle them into our kind of view of the world again and pretend we always knew they were going to happen. So what he says is, what is surprising is not the magnitude of our forecast errors, but our absence of awareness of them. Bank of England, for example, in January put up their inflation prediction for April from 6% to 7.25%. So they were wrong by 20% on a prediction that they made 30 days earlier. And as I say about some of our projections internally, we just have to be about as accurate as the Bank of England. That's all anyone can expect from us, which isn't that accurate. Prop number 1 is the internet being taken over by the World Wide Web. I can't show you this, unfortunately. But the thing you'll take from this section is this quote from Nassim Nicholas Taleb. Almost no discovery or technology of note came from design and planning. There are Black Swan events. The strategy for discoverers and entrepreneurs is to rely less on top-down planning and focus on maximum tinkering and recognizing opportunities when they present themselves. So I love this quote. I love the maximum tinkering. It's accepting that the world is too complicated for you to plan, brilliant innovation, but to put yourself in a position where you're out there, you're trying things, you're poking at things, you're doing things that are a little bit different, in the hope that you stumble across something brilliant, or that over time the learnings you get lead you to somewhere you could never have planned to go. You could never have designed or been strategic or sat down in a room and said, yeah, do you know what we need to do? We need to run these weird campaigns just on Facebook. Now, where he goes to a different level in this book is with the Barbell Strategy. So this is actually your man's investment. He was investing billions on Wall Street. His actual investment approach to his portfolio was spend 85% on proven, low risk, highly reliable returns. So you're not expecting, they're never going to get you incredible returns, but they'll be solid, reliable performers, and spend 15% on wildcards. So high risk, but if they work out, they can be high ROI. In the investment world, this would be venture capital. And broadly speaking, this is superior to your head of finance. I want everything to be proven. I want to make sure that 100% of the money we spend is effective and produces a return, with no room and stifling out the 15%. I think this is the strategy that we take ourselves. So when I'm recommending this to you, I actually work by this and live by this. Last year we spent 16% of our time, 16.1% of our time on things which might not work. So challenges that could have completely failed. And as I said, because you don't have to account for staff time in the annual report, I think you should spend 15% of your staff time on things that don't work. And specifically what I recommend is spend 5% of your budget on things that might not work and 15% of your time. So that takes the pressure off of the head of finance. As I said, you only need to spend €500 per test. So try and carve out 15% of your team's time or of your time in the year to work on new things, new ideas, weird things that might not work. Because ultimately, this breakthrough and all the income from this has come from tinkering. And if you're serious about this and you're really thinking about this in a way that's going to change what you do next year at work, go to that charity's website, have a look at their financial statements. I guarantee you'll never forget what you see there. So I'm saying overall that our jobs are to learn what works and what doesn't work. So we spend 85% of our time on what works and 15% on what doesn't work. And it's not good enough to spend 100% of your time on stuff that works, because you basically are never going to achieve that breakout, meaningful growth that you set out to do. And find things that work weirdly well because others haven't tried them. So the very fact that things are weird and different and not obvious is the reason you should try them, because it's the lack of competition and the lack of obviousness that makes them good ideas. And the framework we use for this, so getting away from some of the more theoretical stuff, the practical way we assess the challenges we're going to do for our clients is we look at on the y-axis, low to high motivation. So we are looking for things that people are already motivated to do. We're not trying to move them and change them. We want to find things that they're motivated to do that we don't naturally think about. And then on this side, we try and make them as easy as possible for people to do. So this is kind of the easy to do thing is really what we've learned over time. The things must be easy. That's what people want. But the motivation thing, it's really about finding these things that surprisingly people are already motivated to do. So all you need now that you have that framework, and now that you have some interesting ideas about weirdness, you need some event ideas of your own. So ideas, big in caps, big writing ideas. What's this guy going to say about ideas? Much less clear on my thinking on this one. I really have 4 observations around ideas that are personal observations from myself. I think it's a very tricky topic to speak and be specific about. But what I found is, first of all, that we hide from our ideas. So that there's a part of our brains that wants us to stay safe and free of kind of scrutiny and scorn. And it pushes us into our email inbox and pushes us into kind of busyness and productivity and, I haven't got time to sit around and strategize. I'm very important and very productive and I get a lot done. I got a lot done today. And it's tricky. It's like the little devil on your shoulder, except it's not as obvious as it is in those old cartoons. It's wily, and it gets you to procrastinate in really logical, rational ways. And I battle with this all the time, where I want to do the easier work, I want to avoid the hard work. And the only way I can get around it is by structure and by saying, no, this is the time, blocking out time in my day or in my week where I have to do something. which ties into the next part, which is that if you put it in the calendar first, then the ideas arrive. So entirely counterintuitively. It's the act of blocking out that time to kind of have ideas that leads to the ideas happening. It's putting in a meeting with a client and saying, I'm going to pitch you 6 new ideas next Tuesday. That puts your brain into a different mode. And I think the only way I can explain this rationally is I think what happens is your fear of looking stupid in the meeting is greater than your fear of having a bad idea. And next thing, you just start working on the ideas properly. And this is completely counterintuitive. Anyone would think you just wait around waiting for ideas, and then when you have an idea, then you put something in someone's calendar, or then you bring it to a meeting. I'm like, no. Meeting first, idea second. It's better to separate the process than the outcome. So if you say, I want to have an idea that raises €1 billion, you're going to have these obvious things. You're going to look at what works, what has worked, what is guaranteed to work. If you think about the money too much, you'll end up doing things that are predictable and proven. What you want to do is actually just brainstorm and ask questions like, what's an activity that someone I know has taken up recently that surprised me? What's an activity that I've noticed more than one person doing in the world that they didn't used to do in the world? Pick a demographic and say, what do they do on Thursday evenings? So going specific and thinking about what people already do and thinking about just kind of ideas generally separate to the income will lead to better ideas. And the final thing I'd say is that this is a muscle you can strengthen. Again, counterintuitive. People don't normally, they expect creativity to be kind of inspiration and things come fully formed. No, like if you consistently make time to brainstorm, think of ideas, to come up with different event ideas, to chat with people, to bounce stuff over and back, to face the blank page, to scribble down if that's what works for you. If you're not more, some people are more kind of verbal, they like to talk it through. I like to just kind of write it all down, scribble. If you do that consistently, something in your brain changes. In the same way that you get better at typing quickly, by typing more, you get better at generating ideas quickly and more accurately and more effectively by doing it more. And the final thing I'm going to share with you is product number 2. This is a Kenko coffee product that my cousin was the innovation manager on. And she went to work for Mondelez Foods in Zurich. Very proud of her. She did brilliantly over there, and she rose up through marketing into innovation. And she was there for years, and this product is the product she actually was the project manager on. And I was on a Zoom call to her during the pandemic, and I actually genuinely had the coffee in my house, not because she designed it, because it's our favorite instant coffee. And I was like, oh wait, I'm going to show you something. And I showed it to her on the Zoom call. And I thought this would be a nice moment for her now. She'll be like, yeah, that's cool. God, wow, impact, great, meaningful. But what she said was, well, at least I fucking have something to show for my 5 years of innovation. Boom. Like, not at all the reaction you'd expect, not the excitement or, oh, that was a very exciting time in my life, I was working on great stuff. It was like, no, innovation is hard. Innovation is filled with disappointments. But I'm saying, in the end, innovation is worth it. And it's the very fact that innovation is hard that means most of your competition and most other charities won't do it. That's the reason you should do it. And ultimately, it's not as hard as most of the things that people you're supposed to be helping go through. So look, you got into this to make a difference, not to make the same. If you want to make a difference, I say, next time you're faced with a plan for the year or a document of activity for next year, some idea that's hovering around, put it in. Just stick it in there, figure it out later, and make the best of it. That's it. Thank you.